All right, let's jump right in. We're taking a snapshot of our world as it stands on January 27th, 2026, and it's a day that really boils down to one single urgent number.
And this is it, 85 seconds. Now, that's not a countdown to a party, it's a countdown to something way, way more serious.
That number, that's what the scientists who run the Doomsday Clock say we have left until a potential global catastrophe. It is the closest we have ever been. So what we're going to do together right now is unpack the major global crises that have pushed us this close to the edge. So for anyone who's not familiar, what is the Doomsday Clock? Well, think of it as a symbol, a powerful metaphor to warn all of us about how close we are to destroying our world with our own dangerous technologies. It's not a real clock, of course, but midnight? Well, midnight represents the point of no return. So, the big question is, why 85 seconds? Why now? The official reasoning points to this really dangerous mix of things. Crucial nuclear arms treaties are falling apart. AI is pumping out disinformation at a terrifying rate, and frankly, we're just stalled out on making real progress on climate change. These are the three big pillars of risk we're diving into. So let's start with our first pillar, conflicts and power plays. This is where we look at the raw geopolitical tensions that are cranking up the heat across the globe. First stop, the Middle East. The U.S. has just moved the USS Abraham Lincoln, and we're talking a massive carrier strike group, right into the region. This is a classic show of force, a strategic power play happening while tensions with Iran are just skyrocketing. In the rhetoric, the language being used, it's just as intense as the action. The White House isn't calling this a deployment, they're calling it an armada. Now, you don't use a word like that by accident. It's meant to send a very loud, very strong message. And on the other side, Iran's leadership is firing back with its own heated language, warning of a finger-on-the-trigger response. This is the kind of back and forth that gets incredibly dangerous. It creates a tinderbox where just one miscalculation could have absolutely devastating results. Meanwhile, over in Eastern Europe, the war in Ukraine is just full of contradictions. On one hand, you're hearing these whispers that the U.S. is floating a potential peace plan, a really tough one involving Ukraine giving up territory for security guarantees. But at the exact same time, Russia's top general is on the record saying his forces are advancing on all fronts. So, what gives? Are these real signals of peace or just strategic maneuvers in a much bigger conflict? That ambiguity is, in itself, really dangerous. Now let's shift over to Asia, because China is also a major source of global anxiety, but for different reasons. President Xi Jinping is tightening his grip on power through a pretty significant military purge, and targeting a top general isn't just some internal affair. It's a signal to the entire world about a consolidation of control, and you can bet everyone is watching very, very closely. And all this political maneuvering leads us perfectly into our second section, economic pivots and pressures. Because let's be real, modern conflicts aren't just fought with weapons anymore. They're fought on the economic battlefield. And this is just a perfect illustration of that point. India and the European Union have just signed what's being called the mother of all trade deals. This is a huge strategic realignment. It's a clear move by two global powerhouses to build an economic bloc that's less dependent on the whims of U.S. trade policy. At the very same time, we're seeing this major shift in global confidence when it comes to China. As you can see on this chart, foreign direct investment plunged by nearly 10% last year. International money is getting nervous, and that has massive implications for the world's second-largest economy. But what's really fascinating here is the contrast. While China's facing this investment slump, the U.S. is actually seeing a surprising manufacturing boost. Core capital goods orders, which is basically a key indicator of business investment, have gone up for 5 straight months. And the driver? A massive boom in artificial intelligence. Okay, so we've looked at global conflicts and economic battles. For our final section, let's turn inward and look at our third pillar, societal strains and solutions. This is all about the pressures building up inside nations, and also the remarkable ways people are pushing back. So right here in the U.S., a major story is unfolding. Population growth has slowed to just 0.5%, a historic low. This is mostly being driven by a huge drop in international migration, and it's a trend that is going to reshape the American economy and society for decades. And these internal strains are visible everywhere. We're seeing lethal winter storms fueled by climate change claim dozens of lives. We're seeing critical infrastructure like Germany's power grid becoming vulnerable.
There's intense social unrest in cities like Minneapolis and a brutal crackdown on protests in Iran where the death toll is now in the thousands. It feels like a world under just immense pressure.
But that's not the whole story, because for every point of pressure, there's so often a point of pushback, a story of ingenuity, progress, and even hope. And here is a fantastic example. Researchers have developed a new tool that can predict type 1 diabetes in children before they even show any symptoms. I mean, this is a monumental breakthrough. It lets doctors intervene early with treatments that can actually delay the disease. This is human ingenuity at its absolute best.
And there are other sparks of progress too. We're seeing greater medical awareness for conditions like ADHD in older adults. We're seeing major companies like DHL expand programs to fight youth unemployment, and even policy moves aimed at supporting vital sectors like American agriculture. These are real solutions tackling real problems.
So what this all boils down to is this. We're living in a moment of really profound tension. On one side, you've got these massive, escalating global risks pulling us toward midnight. But on the other, you have this incredible, relentless drive for solutions, for progress, for connection that is constantly pushing back.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Staring at that 85-second countdown, we are clearly at a tipping point. The forces of conflict and cooperation are hanging in this delicate balance. So what will it take for ingenuity to win? What will it take to finally turn the clock back?